Thank you very much, Blanket, for your presentation. All right, let's move on to the next panelist, Ralph Mills, Vice President with Axiom. Okay.
All right, good afternoon. I have to admit, I'm very honored to be sitting up here today with this panel group. The events of 1989, and personally for myself and my family, were very, very significant. I want to kind of go through some of that detail in the next few minutes, and as we kind of progress through the panel, we can see if there's some more questions. My professional experience, as an Axiom leader, I had the opportunity to actually move to Europe. That was in 2006, and during that time I lived in Düsseldorf and in London, England. And when I was in Europe, I had an opportunity to manage our European technology teams. That was a great experience. I had staff that existed in 5 countries, and some of it was in Europe, it was in Germany. And then later, before I returned back to the United States, I had the opportunity to actually be the country operations leader, the business leader for the Netherlands and for the German business. And that of itself might make me a candidate, I guess, to be sitting here with the folks on the panel today and working here out of Central Arkansas. But I also have a very, very strong personal connection. My family immigrated to the U.S. from Germany, so I have still most of my extended family that lives in Germany today. And I'm from a family that was split along east-west boundaries. So when I was a child, we would visit my family inside West Germany, and we would get a visa, and we would travel to East Germany and visit my aunts and uncles and cousins. And so I was a person who was able to bear personal witness to what life was like there, and the differences in the culture, and the differences in their personal situations and social structures. And then later, when I was, unfortunately, I'm going to expose my age, and I'm older than some of the other folks, but in 1989 I was in university in Austria, and I had the opportunity to actually go to Berlin and witness what was happening at the Berlin Wall. And my cousin was one of those crazy guys that was on top of the wall. And I brought along a little show and tell. I have here a t-shirt. Now, my wife is sitting in the crowd, and she always complains, I have too many t-shirts. But this one is I've kept for 20 years. Okay? I'll stand up. So, this was actually purchased at the Berlin Wall in 1989, in November of 1989. And it says, Ich war dabei, which for the people here who know German says, I was there. Okay? And, we talked, it says, "Wir sind das Volk," and it says, we talked before about the fact that later became "Wir sind ein Volk." So obviously I was a trendsetter. So I was an early part of that curve. But this is something I've kept over the years. It's actually something very, very sentimental to me. I actually was not able to find it or bring it here today to the session. I had a chance to take a piece of the wall myself, which I've also kept for the last 20 years. And that's a little, I guess, treasure of that time in my life. I think that it's a really, really important sequence of events, and for a couple of reasons. One was that, and some other people refer to this, it was not the only event that occurred in 1989. It was one of a cascading sequence in which Europe opened up. The eastern side of Europe connected to the western side of Europe, and it changed the landscape politically. I think also the unified Germany is one of the largest economies. We can talk about that as well, in which it's a very large trading partner of the United States and a very important partner of the United States. We talked earlier about the fact that Chancellor Angela Merkel is speaking to the joint session today in Congress. It's part of being a very, very strong partner of this country. And I think that it's also important to recognize that German is the most spoken language, most spoken native language in Europe. Right? I don't think many people realize that if you include Germany and Switzerland and Austria and Liechtenstein, well, I'm adding in 35,000 from Liechtenstein. But there's a concentration of German speakers in a very large economy that we work with in the center of Europe. I think also there's also an awareness that there is an important reconciliation that happened, okay? And that is from both families and from cultures. And for people who have been part of it and who experienced it, I think that you have to recognize that it's not something that you can reconcile overnight. It's taken 20 years and it is still occurring. Okay? You had two cultures of common origin, but then had 50 years of divergent history. Okay? And different political structures and social structures. And so pulling those two communities back together again, and rebuilding some of the infrastructure and I guess you'd say the social structure between those two communities is a challenge. All right. I was talking to my wife about this last night, and one of the things that I mentioned to her was how excited I was that I experienced this when I was a young man. Because if I had actually experienced this in 2009, okay, as a person who's been 20 years a business manager, I would have thought immediately about, what's the capital expenditure they're going to have to invest in trying to rebuild the infrastructure, and how are they going to get these information systems built together, and how are they going to have controlled security situations? I would have immediately thought about all of these different issues, all right? But when I went there in 1989, as a young man, it was celebratory, it was euphoric, it was hopeful, okay? And I was there, and I realized that I was witnessing something that was really, really significant, okay? And then shortly after that, I think 2 weeks later, I was in Budapest, all right? And that was just, I feel like I had a moment in time where I was in a place in the world where the world was just so dynamic and allowed me to experience that. And I think that if I flash back now to or flash forward, now to my current business environment, I have staff that work for me today that sit in Warsaw, and they sit in Gdansk, and they sit in Frankfurt, and they sit in Neu-Isenburg, and these various other places. And we are one team. We are one team that works for Axiom, and I don't know if that would have ever been possible, okay, without what happened in 1989. And so I hope you enjoy. I don't know how many more discussions we have left from the panel, but I hope we have some time at the end for questions, and I'm excited about the questions you have to bring forward. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Let's then move on to our last but not least presentation by Andrew Drummond, Professor of Political Science at UALR.
Thank you very much. Don't worry, I only have about a half an hour worth of statements. I feel the pressure to move on to questions. I'll keep it very short. Today is actually a historic day. Lisbon was signed. Lisbon Treaty was signed today. This is, for those of you who don't know, the European Union has been this very long and involving process of creating an ever closer union, as it's often referred to, of now 27 member states in Europe. And Germany's been there since the start, and it was Chancellor Angela Merkel this morning in addressing the joint session of Congress who sort of broke the news. I was in the middle of the class in comparative government. I pulled up the streaming video on C-SPAN to show my students, some of whom are here, because this was historic in its own right. This is the first time a federal chancellor has addressed a joint meeting of Congress. Konrad Adenauer had done this back in '57 and had addressed Congress one after another, but this was the first time that we'd seen something like that, and I was really interested to hear what she might say, and she pulled this out of her hat. I didn't expect it. I didn't know. I mean, I checked the internet this morning. I knew that the Lisbon Treaty was very close, but and it was fascinating to hear.
Can you tell in 1 second what it is?
So no. No. The joke being that the Lisbon Treaty, anything with the European Union is so, it takes a lifetime to understand, probably, right? But the Lisbon Treaty, just to sort of, I guess, try to do it in a sentence or two, it's the most significant reform of European Union policy since Maastricht. It's putting together all under one